Highland warriors charge across misty battlefields, their wild hair streaming behind them as they unleash bone-chilling war cries. Painted bodies, gleaming with ancient symbols, they swing massive swords and swing axes with terrifying skill. These are the warriors of legend, the fierce Celtic defenders who made the Roman Empire tremble, who fought for freedom with nothing but raw courage and ancestral pride. For centuries, this is exactly how the world has imagined Scotland's legendary fighters, brave Celts, born from the mists of the Highlands, defending their ancient homeland against all invaders. But what if everything you think you know about these warriors is completely wrong? What if Robert the Bruce and the Highland clans weren't just Celtic warriors, but something far more extraordinary? Hidden deep within Scottish DNA lies the genetic signature of ancient horsemen from the vast Russian steppes. Warriors who conquered continents thousands of years before Rome was even built. The ancestors of Scotland's Highland warriors weren't just tough mountain fighters. They were descendants of the world's first horse lords. The truth is that your Scottish ancestors carried the DNA of warriors from a place called the Pontic Steppe. Endless grasslands between the Black Sea and Caspian Sea, where humanity's greatest fighters first learned to ride horses and forge weapons that could cut through anything. And here's the most incredible part. While other parts of Britain saw their ancient warrior DNA get mixed and diluted by centuries of invasions, Scotland kept this ancient heritage alive. The Highland clans preserved the bloodline of humanity's original warriors better than anywhere else on Earth. If you're ready to uncover the genetic secrets that rewrite history, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because what you're about to discover will completely change how you see Scottish identity forever. To understand this incredible secret, we need to go back to the very beginning, to a time when Scotland was barely recognisable as the land we know today. 12,000 years ago, massive ice sheets were finally retreating across northern Europe, leaving behind a harsh but livable landscape. Following close behind the melting glaciers came the first people brave enough to call Scotland home. These weren't your typical Stone Age hunter-gatherers. These were survivors of the highest order, people tough enough to make a living on the edge of an ice sheet. These Mesolithic peoples had piercing blue and green eyes and builds hardened by constant struggle against nature. For thousands of years, they fished the cold waters, hunted through dense forests, and raised their children in one of Europe's most challenging environments. Around 6,000 years ago, the next wave of newcomers arrived. Farmers from continental Europe crossed the rough seas carrying seeds, livestock, and revolutionary new ways of living. These are the people who built the incredible stone monuments we still marvel at today. The ancient stone circles, the burial chambers, the mysterious structures of Orkney that archaeologists are still trying to fully understand. When you visit these sites, you're looking at the work of people who were slowly blending their farmer DNA with the hunter-gatherer bloodlines that had survived since the Ice Age. Around 4,500 years ago, something extraordinary happened that would forever change the genetic destiny of Scotland. From the vast grasslands stretching between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea came a people unlike any Europe had ever seen. These were the world's first horse masters, warriors who had learned to harness the speed and power of horses in ways that gave them an almost supernatural advantage over everyone else. These people had also mastered something equally revolutionary: the wheel. They built the first chariots, the first wagons, turning their entire civilization into a mobile war machine that could strike anywhere and retreat to safety before their enemies could even organize a response. When these steppe peoples reached Britain, the genetic evidence tells an incredible story. They ended up replacing up to 90% of the existing population's DNA across the entire British Isles. Archaeologists call this the Bell Beaker culture, named after their distinctive pottery. But that name doesn't capture what really happened. This was the arrival of a completely new way of life, one built around metal weapons, horse warfare, and warrior societies that would define European civilization for thousands of years to come. While the rest of Britain would later see wave after wave of invasions that diluted this ancient warrior DNA, Scotland held on to it. The Highland Mountains and isolated glens became refuges where the steppe bloodline stayed strong and pure. The famous Highland warrior culture, the unbreakable clan loyalties, the fierce independence that made Scots impossible to fully conquer, all of this traces back to the grasslands of ancient Russia. By the time the Romans first heard rumours of painted warriors living beyond the edge of their known world, the ancient steppe DNA had already been flowing through Scottish bloodlines for over 2,000 years. What emerged from this mixing were people so fierce and mysterious that they would become legends, the Picts and the Gaels. The Picts of Orkney were especially unique. Cut off from the mainland by treacherous waters, they developed their own distinct genetic signatures while maintaining that core steppe warrior DNA. When Roman legions finally tried to conquer them, they discovered that fighting Picts wasn't like fighting other Celtic tribes. These warriors seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts, using hit-and-run tactics that the Romans had never encountered in their conquest of Europe. But the Picts weren't Scotland's only inheritors of ancient warrior DNA. From across the Irish Sea came another group carrying their own version of the steppe legacy, the Gaels. The kingdom of Dalriata brought Gaelic language and customs to Scotland's western coasts, and with them came additional layers of Celtic steppe heritage that would reshape Scottish identity forever. The genetic proof is written in modern Scottish DNA. About 75 to 80% of Scottish men today carry the Y chromosome marker R1b-L21, the so-called Celtic haplogroup that traces directly back to those ancient steppe migrations. When the Pictish and Gaelic realms eventually merged into what we recognise as Scotland, they weren't just combining territories, they were uniting two branches of the same ancient warrior tree, creating a culture that was uniquely suited to preserving the oldest fighting traditions in European history. The clan system that would define Scotland for centuries was the direct inheritance of steppe social organisation. Kinship-based warrior societies, loyalty to bloodline over territory, honour cultures built around cattle raiding and personal combat. All of these trace back to the grasslands of the Pontic Steppe. Around the 5th century AD, a new wave of warriors began crossing the North Sea. The Anglo-Saxons were coming to Britain, and they brought with them a genetic signature that would reshape the entire island, except for one crucial holdout. In England, the Anglo-Saxon impact was massive. Modern genetic studies show that people in Eastern England today carry an average of 38% Anglo-Saxon ancestry. The Anglo-Saxons brought their own version of Germanic warrior culture, their own languages, and most importantly, their own DNA marker, the R1bu-106 haplogroup. But here's where Scotland's story diverges completely from England's. While the Anglo-Saxons were transforming English genetics from the bottom up, Scotland's mountains and fierce resistance kept most of their territory free from this Germanic influence. The Anglo-Saxon genetic impact in Scotland was limited mainly to the lowlands and the southeast, the areas closest to England's expanding kingdoms. This created a genetic divide that still exists today. The Vikings brought their own complications to this genetic story, but unlike what most people think, the Viking impact was actually different in Scotland versus England. In places like Orkney and Shetland, the Norwegian Viking influence was so strong that today these islands carry 20 to 25% Scandinavian DNA. The Viking settlers brought their own warrior traditions that actually reinforced rather than diluted the existing steppe-derived culture. Both peoples shared similar values: clan loyalty, honour cultures, and the belief that a warrior's reputation was worth more than life itself. For centuries, the true story of Scottish warrior heritage remained locked away in ancient bones and bloodlines. But in the 21st century, genetic science finally developed the tools to crack open these secrets and reveal truths that would have seemed impossible just decades ago. The breakthrough came with Scotland's DNA project, led by geneticist Dr. Jim Wilson at Edinburgh University. When his team analysed DNA samples from almost 1,000 Scots, they uncovered evidence that completely rewrote Scottish history. The study revealed that Scotland isn't genetically uniform at all. But the most incredible discovery was a clear genetic divide that splits Scotland along a line roughly following the River Forth. This isn't just random population drift. This division perfectly matches the ancient territories of the Gaels and the Picts, proving that these weren't just cultural differences, but actual genetic boundaries that have lasted over 1,000 years. But the real shock came when researchers started looking at connections beyond Scotland's borders. A 2012 University of Edinburgh study made headlines worldwide when it discovered that around 1% of Scots are direct descendants of Berber and Tuareg tribesmen from the Sahara Desert. This genetic line dates back 5,600 years, pointing to ancient trade routes that connected North Africa to Scotland through Spain and the Atlantic coast. Dr. Wilson explained that this Saharan DNA marker likely travelled north during the Moorish conquest of Spain, then followed trading routes along the Atlantic coast until it reached Scotland. Suddenly, the genetic story of Scotland became not just European, but global. The connections got even more incredible. Researchers found Siberian DNA markers in Scottish populations, with particularly strong concentrations in the Orkney Islands. These genetic signatures trace back 5,000 years to the Yamnaya culture, the same steppe peoples who had brought warrior traditions to Scotland in the Bronze Age. Some Scots literally carry DNA that connects them to the deepest reaches of ancient Siberia. But perhaps the most fascinating discovery involved Scottish surnames themselves. The Scotland's DNA project found that 15% of people with the surname Stewart were direct descendants of the royal line of kings, carrying what researchers called royal DNA. The project even managed to resurrect lost tribes through genetics. The Meatai, a fierce people who fought Roman legions in 208 AD and then seemingly vanished from history, were found to still exist. A high concentration of their distinctive genetic marker was discovered clustered around Stirling and the Ochil Hills, exactly where ancient sources said they had lived over 1,000 years ago. And then there's the red hair. Scotland has one of the highest rates of red hair in the world, 13% compared to just 4 to 6% in England. Nearly 40% of Scots carry at least one red hair gene. It's a genetic signature that points to ancient Middle Eastern heritage, possibly connecting modern Scots to biblical bloodlines that most people never imagined. Now you know the truth that history tried to hide. Those Highland warriors who terrified Roman legions, who fought for freedom at Stirling Bridge and Bannockburn, who carried their fierce independence across oceans to build new nations. They weren't just Celtic fighters defending their homeland. They were the living inheritors of humanity's oldest warrior tradition. The blood flowing through their veins carried genetic memories that stretched back 4,500 years to the grasslands of the Pontic Caspian steppe, where their ancestors first learned to ride horses and forge weapons that could conquer continents. For the 50 million people around the world who carry Scottish ancestry, this revelation changes everything. You're not just descended from Celtic tribes who happen to live in the Scottish Highlands. You're connected to one of Europe's most ancient and pure warrior lineages, to the horse lords who shaped the foundations of Indo-European civilization itself. Modern genetic science has given us an incredible gift, the ability to look beyond the stories we were taught and discover the deeper truths written in our very cells. That ancient warrior code didn't die with the last clan battle. It crossed oceans, built nations, and continues to shape